Mechalitz puts out a pamphlet on preparing for Pesach. He also has something about the SEDER in there.
Yeah.
And he says which parts to say if you're
you have to make haste.
When you have to make haste, right. He says which parts to say, and then he says which parts to say when you have to make extreme haste. So there actually is a level of what's the most important, what's the least important. We're not going to get into all the details of that, but what I would like to focus on is a part which is maybe somewhat neglected a little bit, but it shouldn't be. So the Rambam says, when he says Hilchos, we're going to go to page 32 now.
32?
Yeah. Page 42 is like the number one, maybe most important, but maybe. But page 32 is what we're going to talk about. So the Rambam says, when he talks about the Haggadah, he says two times. He says, Chol marba l'saber b'tzias mitzrayim hareza meshubach. This is not on page 32, this is outside. So the more a person speaks about Yetzias Mitzrayim, he'll be praised. And then later, as he goes along, in the Rambam, he brings down the Haggadah. And before he gets up to the coming parts, he says, now we darshan from the Parsha of Arami Ovid Avi, and Chol Mayrach, I forgot exactly the words, but Chol Mayrach, the person speaks specifically about this, is a Reza Meshubach again. So it seems like there's another level of praise, specifically this part. So what's special about this part? So what's interesting is, if you look at the order of the Haggadah, you'll find that, what are we doing on the Seder night? What's the point? What are we trying to do over here? So, to answer that question very simply, we're trying to say over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? We're trying to say the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We're trying to say that, in a nutshell, the abridged version, the Kol's notes, Avarim hayinu l'far b'Mitzrayim, we're Avarim to par Mitzrayim, v'yitzienu Hashem l'keinu misham, and Hashem took us out. That's the Kol's notes of the Haggadah. We're slaves to par Mitzrayim, Hashem took us out. And that's the bottom line, right? But then there's an idea of being marvelous supper, to say more. So what should we talk about? Should we talk about, let's pick some choices. Should we talk about matzah? Should we talk about manishtana? 4 questions? Is there 4 questions? Is there 1 question? Why these 4 questions? Why not other 4 questions? What does the he stand for? What's the vav? Is Susha Sidra Mishnah? Hey is Mishnah. Right? What should we talk about? I'm not saying those aren't important things. I'm just saying which things should we talk about? So simply, at least something that we should spend some time on is the story. This is plain and simple. The story of what happened. We're supposed to be telling over the story of what happened. Now, which elements of the story should we be telling over? So I guess as much detail as we can. Going down to Mitzrayim, what happened to us in Mitzrayim, the suffering that they went through in Mitzrayim, the davening to Hashem, the crying out, and then how Hashem saved us. That's the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim.
Plagues.
Not just the plagues. The plagues was a part of it.
Right. Hashem revealing
the whole thing.
It's a miracle that you still get to tell the story.
That's also true. That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So where is that in the Haggadah? Where's the story? So the story in the Haggadah is these 4 psukim. That's the only place in the Haggadah, in the whole Haggadah. The second half of the Haggadah is singing songs and praises to Hashem. It mentions a little bit the stories in some of the Halukas and Nishmas, but where's the primary part of the Haggadah, which tells over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim? That's not the whole story. That's one part of the story. Yeah, but I'm talking the whole story.
Wow, there's a lot of deaths.
It's not so long. It's much less long than you think it is. In this book, which has only one side of the page, goes from page 32 to page 38. And the end, I wouldn't say the end, but a significant part of that is Dam Sordei Kinamarav. That's the Makkos, but that's one part of the story.
Yeah.
It's one part of the story. It's chapter number whatever, 20, the end chapter. That's coming to the end. That's not the story. That's the end of the story. It's part of the story, but it's the end of the story, not the final end. So that's why, seemingly, the Rambam says that this is the part to focus on, because although the beginning of the Haggadah is very nice and very important, and there's a reason why it was put into the beginning of the Haggadah, but this is the part to focus on, the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Now, I'm not trying to put down the beginning of the Haggadah, that's not what I'm trying to say, but going back to the beginning of the Haggadah, you actually find something interesting, just for 1 second. On page 26, we find something interesting. On page 26, we just finished the 4 sons, and we say like this: Avonu Ayinu l'Param Mitzrayim, we were slaves to Param Mitzrayim. V'yetzeinu Hashem Mekenu Misham B'Yal Chazal V'Zayin Hashem took us out. So look, the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says that many people make a mistake. What do? They keep their kids up till the end of the 4 questions. They try to keep the kid up so the kid could say, the children could say, Manashtana. The child says Manashtana. What do? Send him off to bed. Says, just give him one more line. Just one more line. Here's the abridged version of the story.
What about the command that says to be in the end, no?
Yeah.
Children has to be up.
They're little children, They have to be up without becoming. They're going to fall asleep anyways.
Usually they are up.
Every age?
Not a lot, not every
I'm not talking about every age. I'm talking about ones who aren't going to be up for the Afikomen. Obviously, there's a lot. Children goes from 0 to whatever. I'm not talking about all children. There are certain children that are put to bed after Manashtana. The Mishnah Berurah says those children who are put to bed after Manashtana should be put to bed 1 line later. You should say to them the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. At least say the abridged version of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We were slaves by Mitzrayim and Hashem took us out. If you say that on the SEDER night, you got the abridged version of the story. At least say that. And that's why it says, if you keep going...
6.
What?
And page 26, it says it as well.
That's what I'm talking about on page 26.
Yeah.
Right after Manashtana.
Yeah, okay.
So some people understand that that's why it's here. Because in case you don't get that far, it's here to make sure that you got at least a bridge version of the story. But if you read a little further, it says like this. We were slaves to Mitzrayim. Hashem took us out with his strong hands outside Shalom. And if Hashem would not, what does that have to do with me? They were slaves. I wasn't a slave. No. If Hashem would not have taken us out, we'd still be there. We'd still be slaves to Mitzrayim. Now let's look at the next words. Even if we're all big Talmidei Chachamim, mitzvah leinu sabbat Mitzrayim. We have a mitzvah to say the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's number 1. We have a mitzvah to say the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. How are you yod to that mitzvah? Avonu Ayinu l'Param Mitzrayim. Hashem took us out. That's a mitzvah l'sabbat Mitzrayim. And the more you talk about it, the more you elaborate on it, the more details you go into, you'll be praised. So there's a bare minimum which we do right in the beginning of the Haggadah, and that's what the Mishnah Berurah is saying. Keep your kids up at least for that. Make sure they stay at the table at least for that. Make sure at least someone hears at least you heard the story. Is also very important, but at least this is the story in a very quick nutshell. But where do we elaborate on the story? There's only one other place we elaborate on the story. And this is a very important point, not to just skim. Right? The problem is you get up to here and people are tired already and they already did a lot of stuff, so they skim through it. And you shouldn't skim through the Psukim, because the Psukim is the story of going down to Mitzrayim. So where do these Psukim come from? So these Psukim come from a place where there was a quick brief history that a person says over when he brings the Bikurim. When a person brings his first fruit in Eretz Yisrael, when he grows fruit, he's supposed to bring Reishis Pri Adama, the first of the fruits you bring to the Beis HaMikdash, to Hashem. And you give it to Kohanim. And the first fruit, and you say Vidui over there, and you say this whole thing, Arami Aviravi, you say a whole story of going down to Mitzrayim, and basically it's the entire story of Yetzias Mitzrayim in a nutshell, in 4 psukim. Right? 4 psukim, which is whatever, how many words? 40 words, 50 words, 60 words. You say the whole story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and that's what they used to say over there. So what we use as a basis to our story of Yetzias Mitzrayim is these 4 psukim. So I ask you a question, why don't we use Shemoi, Sve'era, Boi, B'Shalach, Why don't we just say over the parshas from Shmos, where it's more detail?
It'd be too long, huh?
So one answer is going to be too long. Another answer is, if you look carefully, you'll see that the detail is kind of spread out over there, and there's a lot of other things talked about in the middle. So just the story, if we just want to focus on the story, it's not so easy to pick a series of psukim over there that just focus on the story. Because most over there talks about lots of different things. It talks about Moshe Rabbeinu, it talks about the mitzvahs that we're going to do, right? The mitzvah of Pesach, and lots of different things are mentioned there. A lot of time is spent on the plagues, but on the story, the real story. Because, you see, when you tell a story, you can't also focus on one part of the story too much. You have to say the whole story with like a flow. So where is that? The only place that's most clear is over there. I'm not sure if that's why, but that's one of the reasons why we take it from Parshas Bikurim. So what do we do over here in our Haggadah? What we do in the Haggadah is a very interesting thing. We take the psukim from Parshas Bikurim, which is a shortened version of the story, and we elaborate on every word. And where do we elaborate from? Almost every word. We elaborate from Shemais ve'er b'y b'shalach. So what happens is like this, just to make clear what I'm saying. We say a shortened version, a concise version, a nice package of 4 psukim which says the whole entire story. And then we elaborate on each of the parts and show, where did this happen, where do we see this happen, where do we see this happen, where do we see that happen. So let's see a little bit inside what I mean, to get a little bit clearer. So before we start seeing the bottom, let's just read those 4 psukim. So here is the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim in a nutshell. Aram Yovid Avi, whatever that means exactly, is starting from the next words. Vayered Mitzrayim, we went down to Mitzrayim. Vayogar Sham, we sojourned there. B'msei Ma'at, a small amount of people. Vayihi Sham L'goy Gadol Atzum Rav, and we became a great, strong, and mighty nation. So in Mitzrayim, we went down to Mitzrayim, we lived there a little bit, small amount of people, and we grew into a huge nation, a very strong, powerful nation. That's step 1 of the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Pasuk number 1. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. They started to do bad to us. Exactly what it means, we'll see. They started to be bad to us. Vayanunu, and they afflicted us. But Yitnu Aleinu Avodah Kasha, they put on us hard work. Here is the slavery and the suffering in a nutshell, right? Obviously, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people suffering tremendous suffering for a very long time. This is just a little nutshell in 8 words, right? Then what happened? You see where I'm going? Just the bold psukim. Turn the page. We cried out to Hashem our Father, the God of our fathers. Hashem heard our cry. So we cried out to Hashem. So we went down to Mitzrayim. We grew in Mitzrayim to a nation. We were afflicted. We were punished. We suffered. We cried out to Hashem. Hashem heard us. He saw our affliction, and our burden, and our oppression. He saw it. And that was step number 3, chapter 3. Chapter 1, the birth of the nation. Chapter 2, the suffering, the enslavement of the nation. Chapter 3, we cried out to Hashem and Hashem saw. Chapter 4, took action. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. B'yad chazak, with a strong hand, it was very the truth, the outstretched arm, with great awe, with signs, and with wonders.
But just a nuance. I mean, it doesn't really say Hashem saw you. It very he cried, and that's why he reacted. He remembered his covenant. And it's not as if Hashem didn't know that they were suffering. He just didn't know that.
Yeah, we'll talk about nuance. I hear what you're asking. Let's stay away from Dukum for a second. Okay. It's a good question. Maybe we'll try to get up to it. But let's just stay focused over here. There's 4 psukim. Those 4 psukim say the story in a little bit of a more elaborate version than Avanu Aleinu L'Par Mitzrayim when Hashem took us out, right? But not that much more. It's basically the entire story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, and that's it. That's the story, right? So we picked those 4 psukim because that is a concise version of everything that happened. And now what do? We go to each point and we elaborate on each point. And we focus on each word because the Torah is written in a way where every single word has tremendous meaning and every single word means different things, right? So the Torah is written very specific that each word means something over here. So each part is a step in the chapter. So in the chapter of going down to Mitzrayim, let's see a little bit where that summary version got its point from and where it parallels to the longer version. Now again, why don't we just do the longer version right away? And the answer is because it's not in order like this. It's there, but it's sort of mixed together. It's things in the middle. There's no place where you could just read the story. So the parts are there. In fact, they're more elaborate there than here. And if it would be laid out like this, it would be great. But because it's not laid out like this, so therefore, we take the summary version, and then we elaborate on each part in a nice, clear, concise order. Good?
So, Psukim is said from Shmos here as opposed to Devarim, right?
That's exactly the point. The 4 main psukim are from Devarim. The 4 central psukim that we're darshaning are from Devarim, and that's where it's said over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim in summary, and then we pinpoint each part of the summary, right? So try to imagine it. Let me try to explain to you in imagination so you can understand clearly. Try to imagine that, let's say a bad mashal, just a quick idea, just to get an idea. Let's say you were to make a concise version of anything on computer. So you took a book, and instead of it being 50 pages, you turned it into a short story, 1 page. But if you want to see an elaborated version, you could click on each word. So you could hyperlink, right? So you're reading the story, and it says, and he cried. And you want to get a little more detail. So you click on cried, and it tells you more detail. He cried, he didn't just cry, he wailed, he sobbed, he was depressed. It takes you to that chapter, that paragraph, which has much more description. Now you click on the next one, it takes you to the other paragraph. So it links you to the key part of the bigger story that is here, but it puts a quick summary that it cuts out not the details that are not important, but the details that are not important for the message of the night. Every single word in the Torah is critical and important, but they're not important for tonight. I mean, not important. They're less important. Right. So therefore, it's a shortened summary version of the story, and then it's a hyperlink back to where over there did it say that part of the story. Where over there did it mention that thing? Right? That is what the Haggadah, these 4 psukim, this section of the Haggadah is. And that is the idea of the psukim, is to elaborate on, is to have a short and concise version of the story, and then to elaborate on each point and show you a little bit more about each point. But still to do it in a way where you go through the whole story with details in a few pages, in a few lines, not such an incredible amount of time. So let's take a look at the words of the Haggadah over here. So on page 32, so we're page 32 in the Arch of Haggadah, if anyone wants to look inside on Kosher Tube. So we're up to the 6th line. It says Vayeir in Mitzrayim, and they went down to Mitzrayim. So what do they tell us? Anus al pi hadibur, was compelled by divine decree. It was forced. We were forced to go down to Mitzrayim. What's the significance of this idea? Why is it significant that we were forced to go down to Mitzrayim?
We were starving, no? In a way.
Right, that's true. But that's exactly what it's trying to say, that we were starving, we were made to be starving. Hashem made us to be starving in order that we would go down, right? But why? What's the significance of that idea? And the significance is a very powerful message. And the message is as follows. at least one idea that could be learned out from here. Some people start to ask a question. I could ask you a question.
Well, it's not so obvious. I mean, Joseph became king, and they are going right then to Egypt to look for food.
Right. So what are you trying to say that what?
That's the obvious thing. That's
So
meant to be like that.
It's
right?
it's meant. Yeah, but why is it important that it was meant to be like that?
Back to Joseph. What happened with Joseph?
Right. No, I hear that. But I just want to say a little bit of a different idea. Why it's important that it was meant to be like that. Because I want to ask you a question. It's an interesting question. But the question goes as follows. I'll give you a story that once happened. There was once a boy in a certain camp that there was a bird got into this, let's say this room, a bird got in. So the person in charge of the camp said, whoever catches the bird is going to get 2 cans of soda. So the boy goes and catches the bird, takes out the bird, and he gets his 2 cans of soda. They go over to the owner of the camp and they say, by the way, you know how the bird got in? Because the boy brought the bird in. Right? So now that the boy brought the bird in, should he still get a reward for getting the bird out? Of course not. You took it in, you got to take it out. So we could ask a question to Hashem. Thank you very much for taking us out of Mitzrayim. But how we get there in the first place? They put us there. So what's so great? Put us there. So why'd you put us there? Let's skip this whole thing. So that's what God is telling us. Don't think that, there was other times in history where people were put into situations where they just happened to be there. So whatever the case is, they happen to be in a certain situation, and someone comes in and saves the day, right? That's not what happened over here. We don't have a Hashem, is not Superman, who sees this damsel nation in distress and comes in and saves the day. Hashem put us into Mitzrayim. The same Hashem who took us out of Mitzrayim is the same Hashem who put us into Mitzrayim. Hashem didn't come along and find a nation that was in distress, that was in suffering, and decide to save them and make them His nation. Hashem put the nation into suffering. And that's what it's telling us over here. Vayered Mitzrayim. Don't think they just happened to go down to Mitzrayim. Honest al pi dibur, they were forced by divine decree to go down to Mitzrayim, because this is all part of the plan.
Because what happened to Yosef?
No, I'm not telling you that.
Okay.
This is not. I didn't say anything about Yosef.
So you're talking about divine providence.
Am I talking about divine providence? Yes.
Yeah, sure.
It's part of what I'm talking about, but that's not like exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is like this. We were put into Mitzrayim on purpose. Not that there's something called Hashgacha Pratis. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's a reason why we went down to Mitzrayim, and that it was a part of the plan that we went down to Mitzrayim. Not that Hashem afterwards came to save us. And that begs the question if that's the case.
But it's not.
That begs, one second.
You get to a situation that it's the people making it. Hashem is just.
I'm not talking about sometimes in life.
Okay, but every time.
I'm not talking about every time. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about. That's not the discussion. In other words, the discussion is not today. The discussion is not, is there Hashgacha Pratis in today's day and age. The question is one specific thing.
Yeah.
Exactly what the Haggadah says and nothing else. Let's not move away from what the Haggadah says. When we went down to Mitzrayim, because Hashem put us there. He put us into Mitzrayim. It didn't just happen to happen and then Hashem saved us. It was honest al pi dibur. Don't think that we happened to go down to Mitzrayim. No. Hashem put us into Mitzrayim. And that does beg the question. If that's the case, so why do we thank Hashem so much for taking us out of Mitzrayim if Hashem put us into Mitzrayim? And the answer to that is because there was a plan. There was a plan. Hashem put us into Mitzrayim because that's where we became Jews. In Mitzrayim was what turned us into Klal Yisrael.
The Sinai, We got the Torah.
Right, but I'm saying in Mitzrayim was part of the process. You're correct. The culmination of the process was when we got the Torah. But part of the process of becoming Klal Yisrael was the purification process of going down to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is considered Kura Barzo. But that's really not what I want to focus on. And the reason why it's not what I want to focus on, because I want to focus on what it says here. That's not what it says here. It doesn't ask the question of why do we go down to Mitzrayim. It doesn't answer why we went down to Mitzrayim. All it says is one simple thing.
We've been in Egypt.
No, what it says is one simple thing. When we went down to Mitzrayim, we didn't just happen to go down to Mitzrayim. When we went down to Mitzrayim, we were forced to go down to Mitzrayim. And that's a fundamental point of the Seder night, to know that Hashem put us into Mitzrayim. Why? It's a different time. We could talk about that. Maybe it's elsewhere in the Haggadah. But the point is that Hashem put us into Mitzrayim, and that's an important point. Good?
And you think it's in the Haggadah?
I don't think it's in the Haggadah. I know it's in the Haggadah. It says it right here.
Yeah, but no, the second...
The other idea?
Yeah.
It's a different discussion. I think it's in the Haggadah. According to some people, it's in the Haggadah. But it's in a different part of the Haggadah. Sorry.
Where is it? Which part?
I'll tell you afterwards. Okay, so then it says, Vayogar Sham. So that's the first couple words, and that's the first message that the Haggadah wants to tell us. To elaborate on the words Vayer in Mitzrayim, it wants to elaborate and tell us, don't think that we just happened to go down. No. We went down by divine decree. Vayogar Sham, and we sojourned there. The word Vayogar is an interesting word, because it comes from the word ger.
Yeah.
Right? And the question is, why does it use the word Vayogar? It should use the word of Vayeshev. They dwelled there, or they lived there, or something else. What's a Yagar? So it teaches us, Melamed Shlo Yorad Yaakov Avinu L'Shtakeh B'Mitzrayim. It teaches us that Yaakov Avinu did not go down to Mitzrayim to settle there, Ela Logar Sham, but only to live there temporarily. Shenemar, like it says over there, Vayoimru El Parai, Yaakov Avinu, or the sons of Yaakov, said to Paro, Logur, see the word Logur? To sojourn Ba'aretz Banu. We came as temporary visitors. Ki ein mira latzoin asher lavadecha. There's no food for our sheep. Ki kavod hara b'eretz Canaan, because there's a famine. V'ata yeshu navadecha b'eretz Goshen. Now let us dwell in the land of Goshen. But we're only here as temporary visitors. So when they got to the visa office, right? They pulled up to the visa office on the way in by the border. They said to them, what are you doing here, right? So what do you think they said? They said, we would like to apply for visitor visas, temporary residence. They didn't want to apply...
Green card.
Maybe a green card, right? They didn't want to apply for immigration. Because Lagur B'Eretz Banu, right? They had to say right away, we didn't come here to dwell here. We're here temporarily. We're in trouble. We have a famine. We'd like to come, and temporarily we'd like to dwell here. What's the importance of this message? The importance is the idea that when we went down to Mitzrayim, we went down understanding that this is not the proper place for us. The proper place for us was in Eretz Yisrael. They didn't move to Mitzrayim. They moved to Mitzrayim because they had no choice. But it was a temporary move. And the Maharal says that in this chus is one of the... Only because of this were they exiled. This is one of the reasons why they were exiled. Why? Because what the Maharal is saying is that had they gone down to dwell there, they would have never been exiled. Because they needed the fact that they always were thinking to themselves, we're just temporary visitors, we're really going back, this is not our place. That's a fundamental thought for them to be having in order to be zoicha, in order to have the schus to be allowed to go back to Eretz Yisrael. And the truth is that this is a good message for us as well. The message for us as well, we have a sabra over here, and the message is that this is our place? No, where's our place?
First, Israel, of course.
So that's over here is
my home. This is my second home.
See, you're a visitor. You're on a visitor's visa.
Visitor.
See? That's where it comes from. When a Jew leaves Eretz Yisrael, when a Jew lives anywhere besides Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't mean whether you have to move there or not is a different discussion. But the idea is that when a Jew lives in anywhere outside of Eretz Yisrael, what's he thinking? He's thinking, I'm on a visitor's visa. I want to be there. I'm only I'm only temporary here. Build a big fancy home and this and that. It's temporary over here. Sure, you want to spend so much money on something that's just temporary, maybe buy a place in Eretz Yisrael better. But the idea is that as long as we have that attitude, that's the attitude that gives us the schus in order to be nigal, in order to be redeemed. If our attitude is, this is not our home, this is not our permanent location, this is our temporary location, we really want to go there, that attitude is the attitude which gives us the schus to be redeemed. Good? So we went down to Mitzrayim with a small number. And we find, now, what was the small number? Where does it say it over there? So again, it points to the pasuk in Shemais. Like it says over there, B'shivim nefesh yardu v'sachel Mitzrayim. It was 70 souls who went down to Mitzrayim. The Ata, and now, Samcha Hashem alekecha v'choich v'hashemayim l'rayv. Hashem turned us as numerous as the stars of heaven. So we went down to Mitzrayim with 70 souls, and Hashem turned us as numerous as the stars of heaven. So this is the idea that we went down to Mitzrayim, a very small number, we'll see in a minute. And we became a nation in Mitzrayim. Melamed, this teaches us Shahayu Yisrael Mitzuyanim Sham, that the Jews were distinctive there. What does it mean they were distinctive there? So it means that, like, if you saw a Jew, you could tell it was a Jew, right? Sometimes you see people in the street, you could tell they're Jews, right? You don't have to, right? Sometimes they're wearing yarmulke, but even if they're not, like, there's a way that you could just tell they're Jews. Sometimes even if they try to hide it, you can still tell they're Jews. But the idea is they were distinctive there. What was distinctive about them? They didn't change their clothing. They dressed like Jews. They spoke like Jews. They didn't change their language. They didn't change their names. So they remained separate. By keeping the culture, the older culture, they remained separate. And the Maharal says again that this was the schus that they were nigal, because had they gone into the melting pot of Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim was the strongest melting pot, right? We've heard of the melting pot of America, right? Everyone comes to America and just melts in and becomes American. And Mitzrayim was right now there's something else, right? It's called multiculturalism, right? It's the opposite of melting pot. Mitzrayim was a very strong melting pot, and everyone came in and everyone melted in. And the Jews stayed separate. How did they stay separate? By not changing their clothing, their names, and their language. And because of that, because they tried to remain separate, and because they tried to remain separate, b'schus that they were nigal. There's another interesting message over here, though. It says, we went down with a small nation, and in Mitzrayim we turned into a nation. And the message is like this. We all know that one of the proofs of Hashem, right? Anyone ever went to the Discovery Seminar? No? You went? You ever went? So one of the proofs in the Discovery Seminar is the history of the Jews. There's a famous letter written by Mark Twain, right? You ever heard of it? Yeah? Another one by Paul, the historian, what's his name? Paul, I forgot. Mark Twain writes a letter, and it's a whole thing about how, right, all these other nations rose up and they had splendor and glory, and then they went away into the dustbins of history, and the Jews still remain. And what's the miracle of the Jews? What's the secret of the Jews that they remain for so long? And we all know that the idea that the Jews have persevered, been the most persecuted nation throughout the entire world, right? Look, even now, you have a little country, Israel. You have terrible countries doing who knows what all over the world, and yet everyone's focused on Israel, always focused on the Jew, always, always, always. always persecuted, always run after. The miracle of us remaining is one of the biggest miracles, and it is the number one biggest miracle in history, and it's a proof that there's a Shem and that we're the chosen nation. But what's interesting is it's not only the miracle of the continuance of the Jews, but the creation of the Jews is also a tremendous miracle. Because let's say a large nation would come down to America in the times of the melting pots. A very, very large nation. So you could maybe imagine that maybe they wouldn't melt in. Like a huge number of people, maybe 2 million Italians.
You go to New York and you think you are in Spain. Everybody speaks Spanish down there.
Right, it's true. It's multicultural now.
Yeah.
But if you come with a small family of 70 people, what normally happens? You mix in, or you grow a little bit. But where do you grow into a nation? Where do you become a nation?
They went as a family and they grew as a family.
No, and they grew as a nation.
Nation, yes.
Right, that's the idea that I'm trying to say. Normally, where you become a nation is when you're living in your own country and you're living in peace and prosperity, and you could build into a nation. It's not a normal case to become a nation. I don't know if it's documented or not, but it may be the only time in history where a family went down to a foreign nation and turned into a nation within that nation. Usually you come in, you mix with the people, you get lost into the group, and that's it.
You blend in.
You blend in. You don't have 70 people come and leave as a massive nation. The creation of Klal Yisrael is a miracle. Vayihi Sham L'Goy. We went down to Mitzrayim. We just went there to visit. We went down with a small number, and in Mitzrayim we turned into a nation. A great nation, a large nation, a powerful nation. All that we turned into in Mitzrayim. In the most unlikely of places for a nation to be born, that's where we were born. And that's the message. That's how we've been throughout all of our history. The entire history of the Jews is a history which is against all odds, which is a history which makes no sense to continue to persevere. But not only the history of the Jews, even the birth of the nation, even the creation of the nation was in a place where it made no sense. Or not no sense, but where it would have been very surprising for something like this to happen.
God promised to Abraham, so we're going to be a nation.
That's true. So there's actually an interesting idea. We'll stop with this. There's an interesting argument which was had earlier in the Jewish history, not that long ago. You see, the question is like this: what did the Jews do when they went down to Mitzrayim? What made them stay distinct and separate? They kept their names, their clothing, and their language. Now let's look at us. How do we dress? How different do you dress than a non-Jew? Different?
We are different a little bit.
I asked how different you dress. I didn't say if you are different.
Oh, no, the same.
Just clothing. Even the biggest rabbi, most rabbis, not most rabbis, the rabbis you're familiar with, how do they dress? They dress just like a guy, just like a non-Jew. Now, I'm not saying they don't dress respectable, but it's still the same clothing. If a non-Jew wants to look respectable, he puts on a suit and a tie. If a rabbi might want to look respectable more often. The only thing we wear very different is the hats. But up until about 50 years ago, everyone wore hats. So now it became a little different. What about our names?
The names changed a little bit.
What's your name? Eric?
Aria.
What else?
Aaron.
What else? Eric?
Yeah.
A lot of people have English names.
Yeah.
A lot of people only go by their English names. So a Shiloh was brought to Moshe Feinstein. Can you name a baby a Goyish name by his bris?
What is a Goyish name?
Whatever. Any name. Any name. And not a Hebrew word. Just a Goyish name, whatever you want. Bob.
Yeah.
Bill.
Okay.
Harvey, anything.
Yeah.
Can you get up and call your son Harvey ben Moshe or whatever?
Yeah.
You can?
Well, there is people like that, I'm sure.
Why?
Why, why they name.
What name did they give you by your birth? Most people I know with English names. Right. Most people I know with English names were given a Hebrew name by their birth, and they just go by their English name. Their English name is their legal name, but that wasn't the name they're given. What name do they write on the?
Yeah.
What name do you write on an official document? You write your Hebrew name. When you get called up to Aliyah,
Okay.
I'm talking calling up a guy to Aliyah and saying Eric ben Avram or
Yeah, okay.
Harvey ben Avram. That's what you call him up to Aliyah. He doesn't have a Hebrew name. That's his name. Can you name someone a Goyish name by his bris?
No, wow.
No. Moshe Feinstein said yes. So he says, even though it says in the Medrash that what was the schus that Klal Yisrael went out of Golos was that they didn't change their names, they didn't change their clothing, so maybe we shouldn't change names, we should only use Jewish names. But he says, look at the Gemara. What are the names of the Rabbanim in the Gemara? Papa. Is that a Jewish word? It's an Aramaic word. Huna. It's a Rav Huna. It's an Aramaic word. Look at the names in the Gemara. It's Aramaic names. They didn't have Jewish names. Why don't you see Rav David in the Gemara? I mean, there are some Jewish names, but there's also a lot of non-Jewish names. Right? You ever saw Rav David or Moshe or Rav Avram in the Gemara? There are sometimes. I don't know if those names specifically. But they used Goyish names. They took the names of the time, of the people of the time. But if you look at the names of Mitzrayim, they use beautiful names. And most of them, or many of them, if you look through the Psukim, they use names with Hashem's name in it.
After people that passed away, or depends which side you are. Even some people they given to Allah, so it always stays the name there.
So how did they have in the Gemara of Papa?
If you come with.
So how do you have in the Gemara of Papa? So how do you have in the Gemara of Papa? Usually people do that, but not everybody does that.
Well, that's a nickname. It's not.
No, it's not a nickname. It's called in the Gemara of Papa. It says a list of his 10 kids' names.
Okay.
Right? When you ever made a siyum, at the end of the siyum, you list his name. Adar bar Papa, Mari bar Papa, Rafim bar Papa, Sircha bar Papa, Rachash bar Papa. Right? Those are Jewish names. I never heard anybody called Rachash. So Moshe Feinstein says a powerful idea, and this idea was a big machlokes, a very interesting machlokes. Moshe Feinstein said, until the Torah was given, what made us Klal Yisrael? What made us Klal Yisrael? The few things that we had. Clothing, our names, our language. That's what we needed to give us our identity. But after the Torah was given, the Torah is what makes us Klal Yisrael, and we don't need to have the unique names. And therefore, it's okay to dress like a Jew. What language do you talk? English? It's not a Jewish language. It's English. It's the same as everyone else in the street. We talk like them, we dress like them, and we have similar names to them, some people. So the Moshe Feinstein said it's okay because we're Jews anyways. We don't need that to make us into Jews. We're Jews. At that time, they needed it to make us Jews. Now this is a big machlokes because the Hasidim don't do this. How do they dress? Like in the Haim. They dress with the Strymol. They tried to keep the dress from Poland, from before.
Right, but that's not.
They don't give English names at all.
That's
and what do they talk?
Egypt, that's not the way they dress in Egypt.
Okay, it's a good question. It's a good question. And why do they talk?
Yiddish.
In Yiddish, yeah. Jewish, Mama Lashon.
Well, Yiddish is English. Yeah.
So why do they do that? Because they felt that no, you have to be distinct, you have to be separate in your dress. You're not supposed to dress the same. You're not supposed to talk the same. You're not supposed to have the same names. So it's a machlokes of this thing that Klal Yisrael did at that time of not changing their name and not changing their clothing, not changing their language, which was the thing which gave them the schus to go out, to be redeemed, if that's something that we have to do, or if it's something that's not necessary for us, because now that we have the Torah, it's not necessary. Shpach.